Good evening and welcome to Mining the Riches of the Parsha. Tonight is Thursday night, March 20th, 2025, and I am so happy to be back together with you, and I'm grateful to every one of you for putting aside some time that we can study together. I want to try something different, and at the end, which will be, with God's help, in 3 weeks, at the end, I would like your feedback on whether this is a helpful way to proceed. But what I plan to do is tonight and then the next 2 weeks, so over a period of 3 weeks, I'd like to study with you Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, one of the books of the Torah, written by Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon. Of course, we're not going to be able to study the entire work together, which I would love to do, but at least we will be able to highlight some of the themes. And you don't have to do this, but you may want to have a copy of Shir HaShirim to follow along. Again, it's not necessary, and I hope that each of the 3 nights will stand by themselves if you don't hear all 3 of them. Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, is a love poem. It is an allegorized description of the relationship between God and the Jewish people. Now, we read Shir HaShirim in the synagogue on Pesach. Usually it's on the Shabbos of Chol HaMoed. This year, because there is no Shabbos Chol HaMoed, it is read on Shabbos of the 7th day of Pesach. Famous line in the Talmud, Amar Rabbi Akiva, Kol HaKsuvim Kodesh. All of the books of the Torah are holy. For Shir HaShirim, Kodesh HaKadoshim. And the book of Shir HaShirim is the Holy of Holies. Now, I must tell you, just personally for me, I have had the opportunity to study this in depth starting many years ago when I was a young man. And for me, reading Shir HaShirim and learning Shir HaShirim is a very, very beautiful, deep, emotional experience. And so, by studying this with you, I'm really studying something personal that has had a deep impact on me, on my life, on my growth. And I hope to try to introduce you to it. And here's my goal. My goal is that when we get to the 7th day of Pesach, and we're in the synagogue on the 19th of April, and we read Shir HaShirim in the synagogue, and by the way, if you're at home, you can read it at home. But I hope that by that time, when you hear it or read it, it will move you emotionally and spiritually as it moves me. That's my goal. That's what I hope for. So I want to try to provide some background, some themes over the next couple of weeks. The first thing is methodological. We analyze Torah based on pardes. The word pardes, which is also a Hebrew word that means orchard, but the word pardes is an acronym for 4 different letters, which are 4 different approaches to interpreting a text. Now, so pardes stands for pshat, which usually means the simple meaning of the text. Remez, which usually means the metaphoric meaning of it. Drush, which means lessons that we derive from it that are not literally within the text. And then sod. Sod has to do with the way in which we utilize the text in some kind of personal way, that we have some personal relationship with it. And in the context of Shir HaShirim, On the level of pshat, the story, the narrative of Shir HaShirim is a love story. It's a story between a lover and a beloved. On the level of remez, and this is the reason that we read it on Pesach, it is a history of the relationship between God and the Jewish people, obviously told in metaphoric terms, but it goes through the historical events between God and the Jewish people. On the level of drush, of lessons that are derived, we will see that there are certain halachos, certain laws that are derived from the verses of Shir HaShirim, as well as lessons in how to have a good relationship and lessons in marriage. And then finally, on the level of sod, the deepest level, we will see that Shir HaShirim is also the story of the relationship between God and every single one of us as individuals. And the remarkable thing about this work is that each verse, each word, should be understood on all four levels at the same time. It is a very complex work. And much of the beauty of this work comes from the weaving together of these different layers that all coexist. Now, on the level of remez, the metaphoric description of the relationship between God and the Jewish people, it is a very, very important choice to how we portray the history of the relationship between God and the Jewish people. Because, of course, if Shir HaShirim is about history, it is striking that it is told in terms of a love story. And so the story will portray when the couple is more in love or less in love, closer together or missing each other, and that is going to correspond to different eras of Jewish people, of Jewish history. For example, the era of Exodus, the era of Revelation at Sinai, the era of the first temple and the second temple, the era of exile. And these ups and downs in the relationship, which we could write a history book about, many have been written about Jewish history, but this book seeks to portray this using the metaphor of the vicissitudes of the relationship between a lover and the beloved. And from that, we see that the best way to characterize the relationship between God and the Jewish people is through a description of romantic love. And from that we learn, and this is one of the main goals that we should get out of the reading and the study of Shir HaShirim, one of the main goals is to understand that our relationship with God must be passionate. There must be romance. And of course, whenever there is passionate romance, there is always the potential for disappointment. Yes. But Shir HaShirim reminds us that this relationship that we have with God, expressed in all these different ways, must be emotional, not just the details. And one of the reasons we read it on Pesach is to balance. This holiday of Pesach that's coming up is so overwhelming with details. You have to do this and this measurement and this way and lots of details. And it's very easy. Many well-meaning religious people get caught up in the details. Did I have this much matzah and is it cleaned in this way and what temperature was the water? but we're in danger of losing sight of the romance of the relationship that is being created by God and the Jewish people as a result of this Exodus, as a result of this holiday. And so we focus in this work on the holiness of romance and the holiness of intimacy. Now, there is a caveat, and that is that there is a lot of controversy concerning this work, Shir HaShirim, because the level of the pshat is the simple meaning is a story of a lover and a beloved, a very romantic, I would say sensual, sensuous story between a lover and a beloved. And our sages were very worried that somehow someone would make a mistake and understand it as just being a love story. But that would be to misunderstand the whole thing. Our sages tell us, it's a passage in the Talmud, Asur lasos Shir HaShirim kezemer b'batei mishtos. It is prohibited to use the verses of Shir HaShirim as a song to sing at celebrations. And by the way, this is something that is often violated. It's not the right thing for, let's say, a quote from Shir HaShirim to be on a wedding invitation. It might seem like it's appropriate and it's often there, but it's not the right thing. It's not the right thing to sing passages from Shir HaShirim at some type of human event, like a wedding. It's not the right thing. And so much so that there is there are many different opinions about how do we translate this work. So Art Scroll takes an approach with which I do not agree, but Art Scroll takes the approach that there's no translation. There is no work of Art Scroll that provides an English translation to the work of Shir HaShirim. What there is, in many different editions, is the Hebrew text of Shir HaShirim and an English version that is the metaphoric explanation of what it is. But there are no references to lovers and beloved and sensual body parts. You're not going to find that in the Art Scroll version. I don't care for that approach because the pshat, the simple meaning itself, has many important lessons to teach us, as I hope to share with you. But it is important to keep in mind that the pshat, the simple meaning, cannot be divorced from those other layers of meaning. And it cannot be looked at as just a love story between a man and a woman. For this context, I am using the Koren Siddur, and in the back of the Koren Siddur that we use at ADATH, there is the text of Shir HaShirim with what I think is a very good translation. You can use whichever version you want. Just a little bit more of introduction. Shir HaShirim leaves a very deep impact on the Siddur, on our prayers. There are many, many places in our prayers where we quote from Shir HaShirim. So there are going to be, even if you're not familiar with this work, there are going to be verses that when you read them, you'll say, oh, I know that verse. I say that in davening every day, or every Shabbos, or every Yom Tov. Shir HaShirim is number 2 in terms of source of quotes within the prayer book. Tehillim, Psalms, is number 1. The most quotes from a book of the Torah are from Tehillim, but the second book that has the second most quotes in the Siddur is from Shir HaShirim. Some people have the custom to read Shir HaShirim every Friday afternoon before Shabbos. Some people have the custom to read this, of course, which we do on Shabbos of Chol HaMoed Pesach. We read it in Shul. Some people have the custom to read it at the very end of the Pesach Seder, because in a very real sense, and I hope that you will see this, Shir HaShirim is the climax of the Pesach Seder. Amar Rabbi Akiva, Kol Aksuvim Kodesh, Shir HaShirim Kodesh HaKadoshim. All the books of the Torah are holy. Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, is the holy of holy, the holiest of the holy. And I hope, again, with these sessions, I hope that when we read it on Pesach, I hope that you'll read it with emotion. I hope that you'll have tears. That's how I experience it. And that's what I want to share with you. Now, as we read through Shir HaShirim, please pay attention to colors, animals, movement of any kind, tense, grammatical tense. Who is the speaker? We will see many times in the same verse, the tense will change and the speaker will change. And it's not so easy to follow, so I hope to share some of that with you. And another very important thing to follow is to look for repetition, because there are phrases that are repeated, but then there are also phrases that are almost repeated, meaning repeated but with slight differences, and I will show you how those slight differences are so important. Okay. We'll start with the beginning. Shir HaShirim Asher L'Shlomo. Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs. What does that mean? Many commentators explain the Song of Songs means it's the highest song, it's the best song, it's the most holy song, as Rabbi Akiva said. Asher L'Shlomo, of Shlomo, of Solomon, King Solomon. Well, we understand that Shlomo HaMelech wrote this work, but Asher L'Shlomo is also understood to mean Melech Shehashalom Shalo, the king for whom there is the ultimate peace. In other words, God. So every time we come across the word Shlomo in Shir HaShirim, we have to read it with two meanings. We have to read it as the man Shlomo, who was the king, the son of David. But we also have to read the word Shlomo as if that's the name of God. Try to keep that in mind. Shir HaShirim Asher L'Shlomo, a song of songs to Shlomo. Does that mean a song to God? Asher L'Shlomo, of Shlomo, of God? Which one is it? Is it a song that we're singing to God? Is it a song that we are singing to ourselves that is a description of God? Okay, again, two layers. Both are true. We have to try to keep both of those ideas in mind as we read it. Second pasuk. Yishakeni min shikos pihu. He kissed me with a kiss of his lips. Kitovim dodecha miyayin. Because your love is sweeter than wine. Notice the grammatical shift. Yishakeni min shikos pihu. There we're talking about God in the third person. He kissed me with the kiss of his lips, third person. Kitovim dodecha miyayin, because your love is sweeter than wine. You see the shift. First, we're talking about God as if God is not here. And then in the middle of the verse, we're now addressing God directly. God, your love is sweeter than the sweetest wine. That's the change from nistar to nochach, from third person to second person within the same line. You will remember, we've discussed this before. Reb Chaim Volozhin points this out, that this is a basic formula for a blessing. We do the same thing in a blessing. Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam. Blessed are you, God. I'm addressing you directly. You, second person, direct. She'akol niyeh bivaro, that everything was created with His word. Him, over there, third person. And one of the reasons that we switch like this, which it can be very confusing if you're paying attention to the grammar, is that both are true. There is an element in which God is nochach, imminent. We can sense God sometimes. And there's also a sense, or there are also times when God is nistar, hidden, away, distant. Remember, the Talmud tells us, Esther Torah Minayim, what's the hint in the Torah text to the book of Esther and the story of Esther? And the Talmud quotes the verse from the Torah, Anochi haster aster potnai b'yomahu. God says, there will come a time when I will hide my face from you. In the book of Esther, God's name is not mentioned. God does not appear as a character. We are taught to understand, to be able to figure out that God is actually behind everything, even if we don't mention God, even if we don't see God. We always grapple with this dual relationship where God is immanent. There are times, there are moments, there are people for whom God is right there. And then there is nistar. There are times, there are people, there are moments for whom God is very, very far away. And both are true. And it is expressed within this shift from second person to third person in the middle of the verse. Or, another way to understand this is that there are two speakers. Yishakeni min shikos pio is the Jewish people saying to God, your kisses are sweet. And then God is responding to us, Ki tovim dodecha miyayin. The love that I have for you, God says to us, the Jewish people, is sweeter than the sweetest wine. Maybe it's a conversation. The word yishakeni, a kiss, can be the grammatical form of the future, as if to say, halavai, we hope at some point in the future that we will kiss with a kiss of intimacy. And that could mean that we don't experience it now. Presently, we're in Golus, we're in exile. Right now, we don't experience kisses. Right now, we're going through a terrible time. We don't experience intimacy and love and romance. But halavai, in the future, soon, hopefully, yishakeni, in the future, it will be that we will again have the kisses and the closeness and the intimacy and the romance that we, Nebuch, do not have today. Or, the word yishakeni can be in the past tense. Yishakeni, we had a kiss. And what was the kiss that we had with God? It was the moment of revelation at Sinai. The moment of the revelation at Sinai was the closest contact between God and humanity that ever was and ever will be. And so it's described as a kiss, a moment of intimacy, a moment of love when God spoke to the Jewish people. Yishakeni min shikos piu, kisses, plural. If we're referring to the revelation at Sinai, why is it two kisses? Why not one kiss? Why is it two kisses? Well, This could be a reference to what our sages teach us, that when God spoke the Ten Commandments, it was only the first two that God spoke directly to the people. After that, says the Talmud, God spoke to Moshe, and Moshe told the Jewish people the rest. But the first two, that they heard directly from God. And by the way, you see that indicated or hinted at in the text of the Torah. Let's just remind ourselves of the Aseres HaDibros. God spoke all of these things saying. So the first verse seems to say that God's speaking directly to the Jewish people. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God. I'm talking to you, right? Second person, plural. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I'm talking to you, the Jewish people. I am your God, Asher Hotzeisicha, I took you out of Egypt. And God says, commandment number 2, Lo sishtachavel lehem v'lo savdein, don't bow down to any idols, ki anochi Hashem Elokecha, because I am Hashem your God. I'm talking to you directly. But then we get to command number 3, Lo sisa Hashem Elokecha lashav. Do not take the name of the Lord in vain. It doesn't say do not take my name in vain. It's no longer a direct statement. It's no longer God speaking directly to us. It's now God speaking third person. God third person commands us as if Moshe is the one who's telling us, God told me to tell you, don't take God's name in vain. What does it mean that God communicates the first 2 of the 10 commandments directly to the Jewish people, and in Shir HaShirim it is expressed, it is described with the metaphor of a kiss? God kissed the Jewish people? Well, it's very clear. It teaches us very clearly. The opportunity to observe God's commandments is not a burden, God forbid. It's a reason for celebration. It is an act of intimacy that God has given us a command and the opportunity to fulfill what God wants. It's such an amazing thing. It's a kiss. It's a gift. It's a sign of love and romance and intimacy that we get to keep Shabbos, that we get to keep kosher. And that's why it's so important to do mitzvahs with simcha, because it's an opportunity. It is an expression of God's love for us that we have this mitzvah opportunity. Verse 5. Shchora ani v'nava benos Yerushalayim. I am darkened, maybe it means burned or singed or sunburned. V'nava, and beautiful. Well, that appears to be a contradiction in terms. If a person's skin has something wrong with it, it's not the normal color, then you would not necessarily describe it as beautiful. This, on one level, is the Jewish people saying to the other nations of the world. This is another conversation that's going to come in throughout this work, where we're not only talking to God and God is talking to us, we're also talking to the nations of the world. And we say to the nations of the world, and we refer to them as Benos Yerushalayim. Shchora ani v'nava Benos Yerushalayim. Benos Yerushalayim, daughters of Yerushalayim, daughters of Jerusalem, we want you to know, Shchora ani, I'm sunburned, v'nava, and I'm beautiful. So, Jerusalem is the center of the world. Benos Yerushalayim means I'm telling the world, I'm telling the human race. Shchora ani, but still Nava. What does it mean? Well, Shchora ani b'masai, maybe I have made some mistakes with my actions, like the golden calf, but still v'nava, I'm still beautiful, because I am the descendant of the patriarchs and the matriarchs. I have a heritage. Shchora b'chutz, maybe on the outside I appear damaged and harmed and injured, but nava bifnim, but inside there's purity. Inside, doesn't always show, but inside there's goodness in me, even if you can't see it. Shchora ani b'yamos hashavua, during the days of the week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'm not really looking my best. I don't look so different from anybody else. I'm busy working. I might not attend to everything spiritual I'm supposed to do. But Nava on Shabbos. But on Shabbos, that's when I'm beautiful. That's when the Jewish people are beautiful. We rest. We come to shul. We spend time with our families, we pray, we study. That's when we're beautiful. Not all the time, but that's when we're beautiful. Shchora, sometimes in our history, sometimes in the experience, in the life of each of us, we have a period where we don't feel we're so beautiful. And I'm not talking superficially, I'm talking about emotionally and spiritually. Sometimes we don't feel that we appear so beautiful to God. I think many people, on the day that the bodies of the Bibas family were returned, I think many people felt, we don't feel like we're so appealing to God right now. On October 7th, we don't feel like we're such tzaddikim, we're such righteous people right now. But v'nava, but there are other times. There have been other times, and there will be other times. And even in these past year and a half, and we pointed out so many times, there have been moments and times when we were absolutely beautiful. The way in which the strength of hostages, the way in which they held on to their beliefs in unimaginable circumstances, the way that Jews came forward to help another. We've told so many of these stories. And these are all stories of v'nava. We have been beautiful even under these circumstances. And underlying all of this is the prayer that we say every morning. Elokai, my God, neshama shenasate bi tahorihi. The soul that you place within me is pure. Inside, I'm pure. I may mess up. I may dirty the outside. I may damage the exterior by my actions, but inside it's pure. Inside is my soul. Inside I'm connected to God, and that is never, never, never disturbed. I shared with you before the way in which Abraham, our patriarch, relates to his son Yishmael. And his son Yishmael, certainly on the outside, is not someone to be proud of. He's engaged in activities that are, let's just say, not the right thing. And there comes a very painful time in Avram's life when he has to send away Yishmael. But you remember we discussed this before. that Avram kept up his connection with Yishmael. And you'll remember from the Torah, when Avram dies, Yishmael comes back, and together with Yitzchak, they bury their father together. Because it is true that Yishmael dirtied, dented, damaged his exterior through his actions. But he was always Avraham's child. There was always an innate goodness and holiness in him, even if it was covered up. And the same is true even more so for us. Pasuk Yud Gimel. Tzror hamar dodi li, bein Shaddai Yalin. A bundle of spices is resting between my breasts. So on the simple level, the lover is saying to the beloved that he has given her a necklace, and the necklace holds some beautiful spices. And the beloved is saying that there is this beautiful smell, this beautiful spices that are resting between my breasts. Listen to this, it's just incredible. Our sages explaining in the Talmud, Masechta Yuma, the metaphoric understanding of this. The Tzrar Hamar, this jewel that is attached to a necklace that beautifies this woman, of course, that's the Torah. And the Torah is nourishing to us. The Torah sustains us. We can't live without the Torah. Listen to this passage, which connects also with this week's Torah portion. So, the Torah describes, in this week's Torah portion, Vayakel, next week's Torah portion, Pekudei, the exact dimensions of every detail of the Mishkan, all the items in it, the materials that were used. Now, if you follow all of the descriptions and the measurements, you come up with something amazing. So, of course, there's a building, the Mishkan. It was portable, but it could be put together, and the building is put together, and the back of the building, from when we come in, the back of the building, is the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies. And there's a paroches, there's a curtain that covers the Holy of Holies, and behind the curtain is the Aron Kodesh, the Holy Ark. Inside the Holy Ark are the two tablets inscribed with the Luchos, with the Aseret Adibros, with the Ten Commandments. The Torah tells us that the Aron had two poles. There were 4 round circles, one on each corner, and there were 2 long poles called badim. And so you would place the long poles, one on either side, through 2 of the holes, and that's how you lifted it up. Because remember, they'd travel from place to place for 40 years. So when God gave the instruction to move, they had to pack it up, and they had to carry it. So 4 people would carry it, lift it up on their shoulder with these poles. The Torah says all of the items had these poles, because that's how they carried the menorah and the mizbeach and the shulchan and the golden altar. Okay, makes sense. That's how you carry something. You need these little round circles with poles to lift it up so people could carry it. Okay. Torah says something very interesting. Concerning the Ark, the Aron Kodesh, the poles had to stay in place all the time. The poles were not needed unless you're traveling. If you're stationary, take the poles out and put them in the storage room. You don't need the poles while you're not moving. Bring the poles back when it's time to move. And that was correct for all the other utensils. But the poles for the Aron, la yasuru mimenu, they had to stay in place. They had to always be there. Why? I've shared one answer with you before, which I will not repeat. But here's an amazing answer. So again, the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies, is a relatively small room. Imagine like this small room. In the middle of the room is the Ark, the Aron HaKodesh. Inside is the Luchos. And then we have the poles. The poles go from front to back. If you take the measurement of the poles, and the room is closed off with a curtain. It was a tapestry, a woven tapestry called a parochas. If you take the measurements of the room and you take the measurements of the poles, you will learn something astounding, says the Gemara, says the Talmud. The Talmud says that the length of the poles, which had to be there, remember, the Torah says it must be there, the length of the poles was a little bit longer than the length of the room. Which meant that if you were standing in front of the parochas, outside of the room, facing the Holy of Holies, the poles, you didn't see anything, you only saw the curtain, but the poles were pushing against the tapestry. So, although you couldn't see anything behind the curtain, you could see that something was pushing forward says the Talmud. How were they located? They pressed forth and protruded as the two breasts of a woman. Looking at the parochas, and you see this form of the badim pushing forward against the parochas, says the Talmud, protruded as the two breasts of a woman, as it is said, my beloved is unto me as a bag of myrrh of spices that lies between my breasts. The metaphoric image that we are to see is that the Torah, which is inside, is not visible, but it is noticeable to one standing outside with the appearance of a woman's breasts, from which a woman would nourish, from which a baby would be able to survive, to give us the message that the Torah, it's not dry rules, it's not just law, it's nourishing. Like a baby needs its mother's milk, we need the Torah. It's beautiful to us, it's sweet to us to have the opportunity. We can't live without it. That is a brief introduction and a view of just a few of the verses in the first chapter. Next week we will continue. But I hope that you're able to see, and I hope that you're able to study it and read it on your own, to see that Shir HaShirim is expressing the most important aspects of our history and our relationship with God in terms that are specifically meant to convey the intimacy, the emotion, the passion, the romance that should be the hallmark of the relationship every single one of us has with God. My friends, I wish you a beautiful evening, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.